I know when I left P&G and people were saying, so, you're going to sit around sort of like on the porch for a bit. And I'm like, no, I've got way too much stuff to do. So I started to go onto YouTube and I found this guy, Matt McKeever, who was posting all this stuff about, the Burr method. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I got to take a picture of his math so I can understand the math. I never thought I could increase the value of the house. There was always only just a downside.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
Welcome to another episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. My name is Rebecca Lynn Matheson, aka the Canadian Cottage Girl, and I am joined by my co-host, the one and the only Matt McKeever, and we have a very special guest on today, Catherine O'Neill. And Catherine has a fantastic story in getting into private lending, investing herself and beyond. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear a little bit about Catherine. I actually met Catherine through the Cashflow Tribe community, and we have certainly bonded over being women in this space and continuing to build and grow our own businesses. So I'm really excited for you guys all to get to hear a little bit more about Catherine.
Awesome. But before we jump into that, I want to break down or maybe lay the foundation for everyone about what Problems and Profits really represents. And so seeing how we're now in season 2 of our Problems and Profits podcast, I thought I'd maybe elaborate just a little bit more on the subject matter. Maybe you guys have listened to the first season. Maybe this is your first time listening to the podcast. I think Problems and Profits, it almost is self-evident on the surface, but at the same time, it can be easy for people to maybe read, I think, the wrong thing into it. And so Problems and Profits doesn't mean that, there's always a rainbow. I think it really means that you have to make a decision to want to see that rainbow, that, there's actually hard work involved with choosing to take that problem or that situation you find yourself in and turning it really into the opportunity that it could be. So I'm really excited to hear and just listen to your experiences, Catherine. And before we jump into the full interview, we always have just 3 warm-up questions we'd like to start with. So I'll start here with question number 1, and it's simply, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Well, personally, it probably was my car, because I drive around in my car a lot, and it's been totaled 3 times. So I'm just like grateful to be able to be here. My most current one, after it was totaled the 3rd time, I thought, I've wanted a hybrid for a really long time. And maybe this is the time to get a hybrid, because maybe there won't be some other time later on. So yeah, probably that. I don't tend to be kind of careful, so I don't tend to break stuff all that much. Stuff has broken at the places I own, but I didn't do that. That was, either someone else or maybe an act of God, which is what happened this past weekend. So yes, yeah, that's what I've done. Oh boy.
What happened this past weekend? I have to ask.
Oh, well, it's going to be my first property insurance claim, because Windsor got flooded with all the rain on Friday. And I got a call from my property manager going, I'm bailing in the basement. And I'm like, oh, did we just finish that renovation? Is it absolutely gorgeous? Both the appraiser and then there was like an assessor who came in today, and he goes, you have the most beautiful property in all of this area. And I'm like, I know I did, but now it's full of poo. Anyway, but that is being remediated and that will be fine too. But yeah, that was this weekend.
Oh boy. Yeah, that sounds like a true Problems or Profits moment right there. Maybe this question will answer itself in your last story there, but if you had $1 million and only 24 hours to spend it, what would you do?
I hope, I can't do this yet, but what I hope to be able to, what I will be able to do is that I want to be able to be talking a lot to people who need money, like flippers and people who are starting up their real estate businesses. And then people like me who had no idea that you could use assets that you have to be able to use those assets and get another stream of income. So by talking to those groups, I'm hoping that with the $1 million, I'll be able to say various flippers, various business owners, etc. Here, let me invest in you, either so I can invest in you or I can make a profit on the side with the $1 million that you gave me.
I love that.
Awesome. And then question number 3 here. Why are you you?
Well, product of my upbringing, my dad was an engineer. And so we used to talk like chemistry in the car. We'd be driving and he'd be like, it's raining with water, H2O, or, whatever. And, there's carbon dioxide, CO2. So we had that growing up. He liked math problems, the train goes this way, Johnny goes that way, at what point, whatever. And so I became an engineer. My brother became a mathematician. I think that was due to his influence. My parents were pretty poor growing up. Their families were farmers or tradespeople, whatever. So they were some of the few professionals in the family. But because they were so poor, they really were very frugal. Like it took them, they bought a house, their nicest house, and it had a wool carpet and it was stained. Rather than change out that carpet, they waited until like 25 out of the 27 years they lived there, and they only changed the carpet then because it was a carpet, it was serviceable. So they were very frugal. And I think the stories they told me about like surviving and thriving, but surviving, being not having a lot of money, I think that influenced me a lot to be as careful with money. Don't ever buy anything on time, only buy your house and pay that off right away, because liabilities are bad, mortgages are bad. So I took that on and became an engineer like my dad, as I said, got a steady job, because that's the careful thing to do with one company, probably about the last person you're ever going to meet who did that for 30 years. It was a great company, Procter & Gamble, really learned a lot, really enjoyed it in technical and analytical stuff. And so there was a lot, where I am today is a lot with that foundation, but a lot has really changed. Like over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I had met a friend of mine. She was my old boss, and we still get together for lunch. And she was talking about something, and she suddenly said, well, her 5 investment properties. And I went, what? Because as far as I was concerned, you had to be rich to have investment properties. And she was like, no, we own these. I manage them. And I thought, you can do that? Like, really? So after leaving P&G and consulting for a bit, suddenly I began to think about real estate. Never had considered it before. I thought it was beyond my reach. And my parents, being as conservative as they were, real estate was always scary. And so it's a good thing my dad's not here, because he would be very upset by what I'm doing. Seems way too risky. And then I was talking with another friend of mine after I learned about private lending. And I said, there's this private lending thing. And she goes, oh, my mother did that in the 70s. And I'm like, Mrs. Fairweather was doing that in the 70s? Oh my gosh, why didn't I know? And I thought, because I never asked. Because I was, all my family, other than the farmers, right? They're all employees. And that was just, study hard, get good marks, get a good job, get a pension, get benefits. That's the ideal life. And so I followed that ideal life until I wasn't following it anymore, and then found that there's whole groups of people who don't subscribe to that. It was like, wow, that's an eye opener. So anyway, that's
yeah.
it.
I appreciate that a lot, Catherine, because I think there's so many people that don't realize what a byproduct of our environments we are. So you laid it out actually quite concisely there, that, growing up with an engineer kind of oriented father, I naturally became an engineer, right? Or a STEM oriented father, you found yourself in the STEM field. And same with, until you were aware of the fact that you were in Plato's cave from like a real estate investor perspective, you had no idea to even go out there and look beyond the shadows. And I'd love to maybe just explore that a little bit further as our first question here. Any advice or perspective for individuals that are maybe being faced with that challenge or the problem of choosing to try and change their environment? Because for a lot of people, our environment usually is our comfort zone. So to change it, it can be very, scary. It can also sometimes attack our own ego. There can be a lot there to unpack.
It's worth doing. It is surprising. And I guess if you don't get around people who are doing things, then you don't maybe even know to ask the questions. I didn't ask the questions because I didn't even know, which is my fault for not looking beyond. And but there is so much out there. I started with so heard about real estate from this friend, and so my kids told me about YouTube. So I started to go onto YouTube, and I found this guy, Matt McKeever, who was posting all this stuff about, the Burr method. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I got to take a picture of his math so I can understand the math. And then started going to real estate meetups. And again, then you start to realize there's a whole like infrastructure going on, this whole culture of people doing different things. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to drink the Kool-Aid. Like a lot of people are saying, are you still in your job? And I'm like, I had a great job. I had a great company. It was a growth mindset. That's why I stayed for 30 years. But there were times that I was bored. And so I'm glad that beyond 50, you don't have to be like 20 or 30 to make a change. You can be beyond 50 and still make a change. It's like life's not over. I know when I left P&G and people were saying, so, you're going to sit around sort of like on the porch for a bit. And I'm like, no, I've got way too much stuff to do. And I never would have met then all these wonderful people like you guys and all the people, with Cashflow Tribe and other groups that I've connected up with, lovely mentorship groups, different thinking, new stimulating ideas. It is out of your comfort zone, and it was out of my comfort zone, but it's very doable. And I remember at one point feeling very unsuccessful. I was trying to sell one of the properties that I had, and I was not making, tried to sell it, fell through, and I was like, geez, Louise. And Mark Smith, who's the guy in Cashflow Tribe, he was just talking, and he suddenly explained how he was doing some deal, and it went sideways, and he was feeling unsuccessful. And I was looking at him thinking, oh my God, you're reading my thoughts. This is exactly how I feel. You feel that way too? And then he said, well, why would you expect to ever try something new, something difficult, and not fail part of the time? If you're not failing some of the time, you're not reaching far enough. You're not pushing hard enough. And that really made a difference for me because, you failed in school. I failed at P&G several times, almost got fired a couple of times, resurrected myself. But why would I suddenly think that this new industry with new learnings was any different? And so that kind of, maybe calm down a little bit and go, okay, I can do this. And I also think maybe coming at it a little bit later in life, I've got a couple of friends who say you're so unflappable. These things are happening. The copper's being stolen out of your property. People are breaking in, all this really awful stuff, the flood, and yet you're so calm. And I'm like, well, on one hand, really, this will serve no one if you're all over the place. But so I am calmer on the outside after having so many decades of getting experience to be calm with things, but also then sometimes underneath, you don't see the hearts pounding away. I'm kind of like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, so yeah, sometimes that hides what's going on underneath.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a few things there that I really want to highlight that you mentioned. That number one, you don't have to be a certain age to move on this kind of stuff. I really love that mindset, Catherine, because a lot of people, they come up with these problems, these excuses that are limiting them from taking that next step, from taking that chance and stepping into a completely different world that will actually allow them to achieve their goals. And by being that example and just talking about the fact that you went through a career and then made a complete life change and now you're doing this brand new thing and failing and learning and being successful. And that is so fantastic. And I think that that's something to really highlight from what you said is it is important just to take that step. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter the time of your life. If you have a goal, then absolutely move forward in that. And another thing that I wanted to highlight there that you said was asking the right questions. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know to ask the right questions. So I think poking around and being inquisitive and always running at things with an open mindset and starting to do the digging and do the poking when you can. And you were open to downloading YouTube, and then you were exposed to Matt and all of his content. And I love that, because so many people are so closed off. So I did want to highlight that as well, is that it's so important to just continue to roll with the punches there. Another thing too, Catherine, that I'd love to ask next is, so you've gotten to this point that you're at now. So what's next for you? You've gotten a few properties under contract. You've been exposed to what is possible in this space. You've made a bunch of connections. What is next for Catherine in this momentum that you have building?
Through the different masterminds that I've been part of, they talk a lot about, defining your goals. And it's taken me quite a while to be able to get there. Maybe because I'm pretty comfortable after, working for 30 odd years. Maybe to your point, Matt, the mindset, right? It takes a while to sort of peel back those layers. I was reflecting on, as a kid, and I remember wanting to change something in my room, but I thought, oh, no, I can't do that, because we're going to move, because I moved around as a kid with my dad's job, and we can't decrease the value of the house. I remember thinking, I never thought I could increase the value of the house. There was always only just a downside. And I thought, wow, like that was age 11 or 12 or 13. And that was already, part of my mindset and ingrained in me. But I think by going to these masterminds, by meeting up with people, by listening to them, that allows me to learn different things, to be able to be exposed to stuff, to be able to ask the questions. And I think that's made a big difference for me, to be able to look at things and come around to what are my goals, not everyone else's goals. A lot because of my age, or the fact that I was in corporate for so long, I'm in a different spot than a whole lot of people who are starting out or have been around this for 3 or 4 years. A lot of younger people don't have any assets. I've got a bunch of assets. We own our house. I've got a big RSP portfolio, because that was the only deduction you could take as an employee. And so I'm looking at this thinking I can do things differently. And so as I thought about what are my goals and what do I want, I've realized that for me, with the assets I have, if I can private lend them, I actually can have kind of the lifestyle that I want. I can travel for 3 months of the year. I want to be flexible, that when I travel, I still want to work, because I like connecting with people. I like solving problems. I do not want to I've never been a sit on the beach person, which is just me, but I want to be able to do that. But I also realized as I was thinking through that, I really miss working on teams. I really miss connecting up with people. And you don't get that when you're just all by yourself. I don't know, even if you're sitting in a beautiful hotel somewhere or whatever, it's like, I need that connection. So I'm really impressed sort of with 2 things. One of them is with student rentals. There's so many bad student rentals out there that, parents and kids deserve something better. So to be able to make it easier for them to be able to find a better product for their kids. And the other one is pre-retirees, because lots of, myself included, we didn't get any, what do you do with your money training? Maybe because your parents had no money, that it didn't get passed down through the generations about what do you do if you ever did have money. But, I started off with, well, that doesn't matter. So that idea of helping people understand that there are, if you're sitting on assets, there are activities you can do which have very limited risk, and they can deliver a whole new stream of income. And you don't have to dip into your retirement savings or your stock portfolio or whatever it is you've worked so hard and so diligently over so many years. You don't have to put that at risk. You can use it and still have a stream of income. Like, blows my mind. So those are the things that I want to be working on. I want to be doing over the next couple of years.
That's awesome. And I'd love to explore just a little bit further the being comfortable asking questions. And I'm going to maybe just frame this in two, I'll try and make them quick little stories for context. But so this weekend, I was at a 4-year-old's birthday party, my nephew, and I gave him and my nieces Bitcoin. And so I'm the only person in the room that knows what Bitcoin is. And the grandparents are there. And also one of the great-grandparents are there. So grandparents will be generous and say averaging maybe 70 years old, and great-grandparents maybe averaging 90. And to me, it was just fascinating because my parents, who are also the grandparents in this story, they've heard discussions of Bitcoin and NFTs and all this stuff. And it's always just in one ear and out the other. And so give the gift, and, you know, my sister thanks me for it because the kids don't get it. And the great-grandma asks, what is this Bitcoin? I've heard about it. I went to the bank. They won't sell it to me. You know, what's the story here? And I go into a 30-minute discussion where she's asking very insightful questions. And I can tell all the grandparents are just like, you know, the screen's on, but no one's home. And it really highlighted for me that there's a choice here to want to learn, right? Like great grandma had made a choice. In theory, she's in a more difficult position to understand Bitcoin than the grandparents, because all the grandparents actually use tablets or a modern cell phone or a computer. I don't believe great grandma really does. And it was really interesting to me. And it reminds me of right before I quit the corporate world. I remember talking to a mentor of mine who was a very successful serial entrepreneur. He also a cousin of mine. And I was asking him, you know, have you ever heard of these like people paying for coaching, like not going to get a master's in business, like an MBA? I was like, I got my CA license already. I don't really think I want to add an MBA to it. I don't get the point. But I was like paying just a really successful person or a rich person to like see what their life's like, to learn it. And he was like, it sounds like a scam. And I was like, yeah, I guess it probably does sound like a scam. And I kind of just left that there. And for a couple of years, didn't really pick it up because he was more successful than me, and just without a doubt. And, you know, I think he was right. It would be a scam for him because he'd be entering that engagement thinking it's a scam. So he wouldn't be there to like take anything from the experience. At the same time, I think it's fascinating, your story, Catherine, because I kind of view real estate as maybe like a second career for you, right? And so you had a very long-standing, successful, you know, prestigious career at P Eng, and then you decide to go learn about real estate. But again, not even just learning about real estate, you're now learning from like a random kid on YouTube about real estate. And for so many people, they would look at it and be like, no, I've had a 30-year career, like I'm an engineer, like what could this kid possibly teach me? But to me, it's the same thing as the great grandma that's like, what's this Bitcoin? And like, for me right now, I'm learning lots about Bitcoin and NFTs. I'm learning them from like 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that are still living with their parents. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts and your approach to just being open to learning that, and any tips for anyone that maybe, you know, they know that it's in their best interest to ask these questions and maybe be embarrassed sometimes by a lack of knowledge. But how can people get more comfortable just kind of setting their ego aside and like actually learning?
You really do have to. And it was an eye-opener for me because in the corporate world, as I gained in I don't know, tenure, you know more and more about your subject matter. And so you become an expert. You are the expert. You also almost have to avoid being too much the expert. Like, well, I've been there, done that. So like, no, we're not doing it again. You're like, oh my God, I'm not open. Like I've turned into those people that I remember. But yeah, like the number of people who, and I had the same attitude when I found one group and it was, you know, run by you, Matt, and somebody else, these young guys. And I'm like, this is a scam. There's nothing they can teach me. They're only out here for the money. I think that was probably it. There is no more learning that exists, and it's all just about trying to fleece you for money. And like my mouth was hanging open when I went to my first event, because there was stuff that I didn't know, lots of stuff that I didn't know. And people were amazingly generous, trying to explain things and bring people along. And I really, maybe in the corporate world, it's a little dog eat dog. Like, you know, if I win, you lose, therefore you've got to lose so I can win. And this abundance thinking about we can win together really really appealed to me, because that's how I have always felt myself, but couldn't bring out in the career so much. But to be able to hear other people articulate that, it was like, that's so cool. And then to, I guess, as you said, set aside your ego a little bit to say, okay, not only may I not be the smartest person in the room, okay, I'm really not the smartest person in this subject matter in this room. I've got some strengths because of the age and tenure and other things, but there are places where I'm really weak on this, and being able and open to listen to it and to think about it and to judge it for yourself. And I will pick up on your point about paying for mentorship. That was so not what I was brought up with. You paint the house yourself, you cut your own grass. If you can't do it, then you don't want to do it, right? If you can't take care of those bushes, don't buy that house, because you're going to have to take care of those bushes and you can't do it. It was only in my latter years, well, in my dad's latter years, he paid for things because he was just too old to do it himself. So that's how I grew up. And so I was looking at mentorship and I was thinking it's a scam. To your, the guy who's guiding you. And I've come like 180 degrees, because I've listened to people talk about, if people give things away for free, where is the ownership in it? There is none. If something else comes up that they really do own, then why you're getting it for free? Why do they care? So you want to pay someone who is invested in you, who, if you're saying, I am coached by this guy, I mentored by this girl, you want to be able to, they want to make sure that you're a good end result, because it reflects upon them. And so that's been like totally mind-blowing for me. And as part of one of the groups that I'm in, I remember reaching out to a guy, because you friend them on Facebook, and he was stating that he'd lost 25 pounds. And I thought, I've been trying to lose weight and get healthier for 10 years. I am the most boring person. Talked about it every year, constantly. I've got to get more exercise. I've got to stop drinking the alcohol. I got to do this stuff. 10 years of just, no action, all talk. And so I called Keith up. He recommended his guy. It's paid. So I've got to pay for it. So I pay for it. Oh my gosh, like I've lost 25 pounds. I've got little teeny muscles now. The alcohol is way down, and I wouldn't go back. I've renewed, because I am grateful that somebody out there is smart enough and a subject matter expert, and I can just accept this and comply. So there are places where I do want to lead and I do understand, but this whole what weights to lift, when and how, I don't care to understand that. I just tell me what I need to do and I will do it. And that really has opened up my eyes to looking at the world differently and being much more open to say, I want to pay for that expertise. And if someone's doing it, they should get paid for it. They should not expect to do it for free. That's a big change in me. I don't know how you bring it about, other than there's always new stuff. What was that saying from in the patent office in 1901 or something? Everything that's, worth being invented has already been invented. Mm-hmm. And then we had the 20th, and then followed by, the 21st century. So just amazing. Just amazing. So
yeah,
I would say go for it.
Absolutely go for it. And something that I want to highlight there, especially to give a little bit of context here to my background, I actually came from the fitness industry and spent many years of my life training people and coaching people. And I can definitely confirm that the programs that we launched that were free programs versus the programs that you had to pay a high ticket price, the buy-in was exponentially different. And it comes from you vote with your dollars for the things that you care about. And so many people say, oh, I ought to do this. Oh, I probably should do that. But those are wishful thinking ideas without actual commitment. And it's when you actually vote with your money, and this matters if you care about money. So if you don't care about money, then that's not going to make an impact on your commitment level. But if you do care about the money and you put X amount of dollars down and it's amount of money that is impactful to you, then you're going to do the thing that you just voted with your money for. So whether that be fitness, whether that be education, whether that be just continually building and improving yourself from a mindset perspective or beyond, or working with a coach, working with somebody who has done it before in order to gain their knowledge. I do for sure get your point there about really actually committing when you do that. And I think it's when you make those moves, you almost draw a line in the sand of this is what I'm doing now, and this is who I am becoming now, because you've put your resources towards that thing. So I definitely see a ton of value in certainly allocating funds or time as well as a resource towards those things. So congratulations on losing that 25 pounds. That is a huge accomplishment, and done or wished for by many and not done by many. So it's definitely huge that you were able to do that. So one thing that I'd love to explore with you, Catherine, because you've really submersed yourself in this environment of investing on yourself, not only through investing in real estate and building your financial well-being, but investing in yourself across all levels: mindset, fitness, health, financial well-being, all across the board. You've really invested and voted with your dollars towards those things. So what I guess next steps would you say for somebody just getting started? Like, what are the actual actionable items that somebody would need to do in order to take steps in the right direction to change some of those things in their life?
Probably the big thing is to get some context, to get educated. There are YouTube videos, lots of YouTube videos that you can learn from. That is easy because there's no risk with that. You sit at home, you watch them yourself. You don't have to proclaim that you've done anything. You haven't changed in any way. You're just sort of quietly absorbing content. There are books. I had no idea until I started listening to various YouTubes or various groups talking about the number of books that were written about real estate, but also about mindset, which I didn't think that I needed, because I'm a genuinely positive problem-solving person. You can't possibly have a scarce mindset if you're like that. And then I found out, oh my goodness, yes, you can. So some on mindset, and then a whole bunch on books on process, and basically turning something, I had a wish. I thought I would have told you I had a goal to lose 25 pounds, but I had no plan. And so it was really a wish. It was a wish for 10 years. And then eventually I voted with my dollars, as you said, and got a plan. And I think there is some benefit in being a little older, because your time is shorter. If you don't do it now, that was what came to me. If I don't do this now, who is to say in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, I will be able to do it then? So if I want to do this now, this is the time. And I'm feeling that way about a lot of stuff. So that might be a positive thing if you're older. It's like, oh yes, I got to change, and it's a big change, and it feels like it's kind of really late. But on the other hand, maybe you move along faster with greater urgency because this needs to happen soon, or you've got end dates. My spouse is retiring, so I want to get something done before they retire because we want to do something else, or I want to take care of my parents and they're aging, and I better do that soon because they're aging as I am vacillating back and forth, so I better get on with that. So I think getting on with things, changing things, being open, the meetup groups, as we talked about. And I don't know, I've just been I've really enjoyed, I tried various groups and they were good, but perhaps finding one, like the group I found is the group I never thought that I would have liked. As I said, I was sitting there going, it's a scam. And it's like, oh, wow, it's providing a lot of value. And maybe then, with your ego, allowing yourself to say, okay, maybe this is not a group that I thought. I would really benefit from. But if I am benefiting it from, who cares? If nobody else, why would anyone else's opinion or thought or point of view change my mind to compared to what I actually feel that I'm getting out of it? I've had so many people tell me, give me so much advice on real estate. I'm going too fast. You should never have bought that property. When I had the flood this weekend, I was talking to a friend of mine, and every time there's a problem with the property, she says, "Are you selling now? Now are you selling?" Every single time. And I'm like, it's great. It's going to be great. These are just little setbacks. I'm thinking to myself, okay, because it's a sewer problem. It's not, the house is waterproofed. We've got 2 sump pumps. It's like I've done everything I can, but the sewer system is old, and I don't have control over that. So I'm thinking, okay, well, if it's going to flood every 5 years or 10 years, then just be prepared for that. As you said, problems are profits. It's like, don't sell the golden goose because we've got one bad egg. Just be prepared that every once in a while there's a bad egg, and deal with it then. Prepare for it, but deal with it then, as opposed to saying, oh no, I'm out, I'm taking my ball and I'm leaving the sandbox. I'm like, I'm not leaving a sandbox. I am staying here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. And so you actually covered a lot of probably what my next question was going to be. It sounds like you're really proactively tackling a lot of the challenges or obstacles that you're identifying right now in your life. Is there currently like a problem or maybe an opportunity that you're too busy to tackle, or just it's not a passion of yours, but maybe it's something out there that you're like, someone's going to make a lot of money doing this, but just not me?
Well, there are so many good ideas. Like you start to listen to people, or they're talking about things, so many, all kinds of stuff that I don't know anything about, like, writing applications. I think that was part of some of the compliance with the fitness. It's like, it's an app on your phone. You have to click on things, and then, you get little check marks or whatever it is. So lots of that type of stuff. Really, it's the ability to make things better is quite unlimited. And one of the things that I have learned, because at P&G, everything was a product, a better laundry detergent, a better shampoo. These are categories that are ancient, well understood, and you are trying to do something better. But I'm listening to people saying, well, if you think there's a problem and you've got a solution, then deliver that. And the only question is, how much money can you make, or how many people are interested? But to some extent, you can just ruminate on it and do nothing, which I've been tending to do a little bit. And then versus just like getting going and make some progress, do some activity, reach out to people, and then see. And I'm like, that's really good advice. And it can fuel your passions. You may not even, if you see a problem, it's probably a problem for other people, but probably they're not willing to work on it. So if you're willing to work on it, and you can surround yourself with people who can say, oh, this is how you can monetize it. Because I honestly, sometimes I'm like, no, I'm just going to do this thing. And they're like, are you giving it away? And I'm like, yes, I am. Perhaps I should not. Good point. Help me with that. And then you find opportunities. So there's a universe of opportunities out there. It's pretty darn amazing. But do I have any in particular? As I said, I like kind of like that student housing thing is of great interest to me, and the pre-retirees, and the ability that you could use equity in your house and have a new stream of income. Like, I know it's old, but that's so new. So new.
Absolutely. I love that, Catherine. Well, before we wrap up here, 2 questions for you is, number 1, where can people find you? And number 2 is, I'd love to hear from you any closing thoughts or any final pieces or tidbits that you'd like to share with the audience.
So they can reach me and follow me on Instagram, Catherine O'Neill 416. I wanted to be 905, but it was already taken, so I became 416. You can also reach out. I'm a big email person at o'neill.ca@outlook.com. So those are probably, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. under Catherine O'Neill P Eng. So those are things. Going back to the problems piece, and I was working with a contractor and had asked people about him and had found out that there were issues. And so I did my due diligence. I got a great, invested in a great construction contract. I got him to scope out all the work very diligently, because he normally didn't do that. I got him to scope out the timeline, because that was another issue, very diligently, because he didn't do that. And I did feel a little bit like I didn't have another choice. That's always a bad feeling, but I didn't have another choice. And so I thought, I'm set. I've covered it. There we go. And as things dragged on a little bit, and I'd paid my deposit of $37,000, he then began to sort of go bankrupt, and then went bankrupt, and there he was gone, and his company was gone, and my money was gone, and I was out $37,000, which, as I've learned, other people have lost money, not with the same contractor, but anyway. And so you might have said, well, that's just a big boneheaded move right there. But in the middle of that, suddenly I came across this other group, the one with the two young men, Matt McKeever, and if things had worked out with that guy, I would have not learned about private lending, not learned about different exit strategies. I would be all about, a certain type of rental, and just doing that in a certain city, and have not met people from, Moncton to British Columbia to all over the place. It was a very challenging time and a really awful thing to have happen. But when this door closed, definitely a really great window opened. And so I don't know, maybe I guess I will probably look at this in a couple of years and say that was a blessing. That $37,000 was my ticket to a much better, goals that were much bigger, much better understanding, much happier life for me. I just didn't know it at the time. So I would say, you know what? Stuff happens, roll with it. Problems are profits. If you keep saying, I'm just going to keep walking over those problems, keep dealing with the problems, then the profits will follow.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing, Catherine. Really appreciate it. Great way to wrap it up. Again, those problems can be a great catalyst to all your future profits.
I am shocked. It took me a while, because of course you feel like a loser. And I was like, and there was a little bit of me that was nagging at me going, this is a little risky, but I kept saying, no, I've done all this stuff. It can't how could it possibly go bad? And then it did. But then when I was thinking about it, I would never have found Cashflow Tribe. I would never have been open to it. I would never have started to attend these things. I would have been too busy. I would have been busy with the other stuff. So my goodness, what a blessing that turned out to be.
Absolutely. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Problems or Profits, and always exciting to hear all of your stories. So wishing you all the best. And for those of you listening, make sure you check out Catherine's Instagram and LinkedIn. She always has the best posts. So make sure you reach out and connect with Catherine to follow this awesome episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. Thanks again, Catherine.
Thank you very much. I really have appreciated being here, and I appreciate everything that you guys do to be able to open up the space and let people know about things. I really appreciate it. I'm a subscriber.